Welcome everyone. I hope you enjoyed the previous animation video of Introduction to Algorithm. And in this video, we are going to talk about pseudocode. But before we start the pseudocode, let's quickly go over the algorithm. So as you have watched in the previous video, this person's name gives rise to the terms algorithm. The name of this person is Al-Khwarizmi. Okay. One of his achievements in algebra was his demonstration of how to solve equation by completing the square, for which he provided the geometric justification. Okay. And algorithm, it is basically a process or a set of rules to follow to carry out a task or solve a particular problem. Okay. An algorithm, it can be expressed in various ways. Some of the common ways to express an algorithm are natural language, for example, such as English, as step-by-step descriptions of the procedures that are involved. And it can also be expressed in a programming language. Second one is code. Okay, the algorithm can be expressed in a programming language as well, by using the codes, using its syntax and its constructs. And besides the natural language and code, algorithm can also be expressed in the pseudocode and flowcharts. In this video and the next, we will talk about the pseudocode and charts in details. We will get to know what is pseudocode and what is flowcharts and how we can use them. So the pseudocode, it is basically a high level description of steps involved in an algorithm. Okay, it is written in a syntax that is similar to programming language, but it's not tied to any programming language. It allows programmers to use English-like sentences to write an explanation of what the program is supposed to do. Okay. In pseudocode, we sketch out our codes without getting bogged down in the syntax and the structure of any programming language. It makes it easier for us to catch the mistake without even having to write or debug the actual code that we have. Okay. And pseudocode, the pseudocode often uses the structural convention of normal programming language, but it's intended for human reading rather than the machine reading. Here is an example of how we can apply the pseudocode for how we can use the pseudocode of solving a task. Suppose that you are writing a program that can check if the person is eligible to vote. Okay. And if you apply the pseudocode, this is how you can write those steps. First, you begin, and then you need to ask the user's year of birth. Okay. And once you get the user's birth year, then you will calculate the age of the user in the third step. Okay. And once you calculate the age of the person, then you can create the conditions whether the person is eligible or not eligible to vote. And then you can end the program. Okay? This is an example of the pseudocode. As you can see, we have the step-by-step explanation, procedure, everything that is involved in the pseudocode. Okay? So why we should use the pseudocode? What benefit it is actually giving us in terms of solving a problem? Well, you see, understanding the problem and requirements of the problems are essential for solving any problems or any task. Pseudocode can help us to improve the efficiency, okay, and makes it easier to read and catch the mistakes in a program. It also provides the greater flexibility Plus, it enhances the collaborations and communications on the project. For those reasons, that's why we need a pseudocode. Okay, let's do a couple more tasks about the pseudocode. Here is one practice task. Write a program that can ask the user for the temperature in Celsius and converts into the Fahrenheit. Which means this time we need to get an input which will be in Celsius, and our output at the end in our program, our output should be in Fahrenheit. Should convert that Celsius to the Fahrenheit. Okay, so let's see how we can write the pseudocodes for this task, this particular task. First, you begin. Second, you will display the message such as enter the temperature in Celsius. Okay, and then user is going to enter the temperature in the third step, which means you need to read it. Okay, and once you read the user entered temperature in Celsius, next you need to use the formula to convert that Celsius to the Fahrenheit. Okay, and after the conversion is done, after this fourth step, after the conversion is done, then you need to display the result, Fahrenheit result, and then you end the task. Okay, so this is the pseudocode, the step-by-step procedure of how we can complete this task of converting Celsius to the Fahrenheit. So once you have the pseudocode, then it's going to be easier for you to catch the mistake if there's any. Without even writing the program, you will be able to catch the mistake and correct it. Okay. And here is the second task of pseudocode. This time, you need to write a program that can ask the user for a number and then display whether the number is odd or even. Okay. So after user provides the number, we have to display if the number is odd or even. So there are a couple things that will be involved in this task. You need to get an input from the user, and then you need to use that input to determine whether the user entered number, the input is odd or even. So here is the pseudocode for this particular task. First is always begin. You need to start it first. And then you need to display this message, enter a number. At the same time, you need to get the user input. You need to read whatever the user has entered. Okay? And once you read the user user number, then you will be able to determine whether the number is odd or even. You can create your conditions to check if the user entered number met with the condition of being odd or even number. Okay, and once you have the result, then you can display the result and end the task. Okay, so this is the pseudocode. As you can see, we do have the step-by-step explanation, the procedure in this task. And let's do one more task, the last task. In this task, we need to find the sum of n numbers until the user quits. Okay. So which means here is a looping process that is involved. We need to constantly ask the user to enter a number until user no longer wants to enter a number. And once user finish entering them, we need to return the sum of those numbers, right? So here's the pseudocode for this particular task. First we begin, okay? And then we need to have a variable. We need to have a variable which will be intended to be used for containing the final result at the end. Okay, we can name it as sum. This one you can see it as a container, okay, which will contains the final value at the end. At the beginning, it will be set to 0 because at the beginning user haven't entered any number yet. If the user does not enter any number, this number should be set to 0. And then, starting from the third step, we need to read the user entered number. Okay. So we have sum and num, those two containers, or also known as variables. Sum is for containing the final result. Num is for containing whatever the user enters. Okay. So we need to get the user input and assign it to this variable num. Okay. And then once we have the user entered number, this num we will add it to the sum. The user entered number will be added to the result. Okay. When user first enters the number, we will take that number and add it to the result. And then we can ask the user, if the user wants to quit. If the user wants to quit, then we will just display the sum, which will be the result of the first entered of the user entered number. If the user says no, then we will repeat it starting from this third step. Okay, we ask the user enter a number and assign it to the variable num, and then we will add the value of the num to the sum. Okay, so which means now the num will contain the value of the second user entered number, and second user entered number is also added to the sum. So every time when the user enters no for this answer, for the question number 5, at the question that is at step number 5, that means the new number will be stored into this variable num, and then that number, the value will be added to the sum. So we will repeat it over and over again until user enters yes for this answer, for this question, do you want to quit? Once user enters yes, then we will just display the sum. Then the program will end. Okay. So once we have the pseudocode, we will be able to debug our codes and catch the mistake without even writing it. Okay, because in the debug code we do have the clear explanation of each steps of what we're supposed to do. Thank you so much, everyone. In the next video, we will be talking about the flowcharts. See you all in the next video.